patriotism, and when we presented it, Mary wept. That's a patriot. You are most welcome anywhere on it.
Wow, what a day, huh? Listen, let me just tell you, we came in from Washington this morning because we wanted to come over to participate with us. But no sooner, and this, seriously, as soon as we hit the state line in West Virginia, the sun was out. It was a fabulous, and it didn't last very long. But the closer we got, the more the rain came back. But we did get a chance, and we made a point every time, every week. We're back in the district. I want to be here because that's who we represent. We don't represent the people in Washington. We represent the people of the 1st District of West Virginia. And so we're back here every weekend to be able to spend time. Well, let me just, again, say thank you. I can't tell you how much it means to me for the honor to represent you in Washington. The message that we talked about here, with Nancy Pelosi, let me tell you folks, it was this card, this voting card. This is the voting card that took Nancy Pelosi and where she had to give up her gavel. But it was also this voting card that reduced the spending in this country. And the first one by $100 billion is what we're committed to that. That's what this message has to be for all of us. We've stayed on our message because that's what I think is the thing that so many people, when they go to Washington or wherever, they kind of lose their way. We talked about 4 things. We talked about creating jobs and protecting those jobs that we had. We talked about cutting spending. We talked about the health care on the Obamacare, and we talked about protecting and working with the coal industry to protect it because it's a lifeblood. We have been focused on that every day in Washington. We've had 100 days in Washington so far. And curiously enough, when I totaled them up, I've sponsored or co-sponsored 100 bills. So virtually every day I'm there. We're working on bills that are going to address the issues of jobs. We've addressed the issue about health care. We're addressing the issue about the EPA because there's no question for all of you. The EPA has an agenda against the coal industry and all of that, and what effect that's going to have on us in West Virginia. So what we have to do is we're keeping our focus. We're going after it, and we're going to cut the spending. You've already seen some of the direction we're going in on that we have to make that tough choices, and we did those. We voted on $100 billion. But the message still is coming up. We still have something ahead of us. And that is what we're going to do with next year's budget and what we have. Because remember, the first 100 days, we spent most of the time dealing with the fact that our predecessors in Congress did not adopt a budget. How many of us could deal with our businesses and our families without a budget? But that's how Congress has been operating. It makes no sense to any of us. For Bill Maloney, you wouldn't be able to run your business, and you've got a solid business, what you created. That you can't do that without having a budget. So we've spent a lot of our time and our resources of going back and correcting what last year's Congress did and didn't do. But now the attention is starting to turn. Now we're going to start addressing the big issues. We have the big issues of spending, getting that under control, getting the Obamacare. We've got a vote coming up that was one of the commitments we got. The Senate said they'll never vote on Obamacare, and they're never going to vote on Planned Parenthood. They said they're never going to do it. But last week, Harry Reid had to announce we're going to schedule a vote on Planned Parenthood, and we're scheduling a vote on creating and doing away with health on the Obamacare. Yeah, that's exactly right. You understand. But listen, it's been very difficult. We've got people over there that they don't think like we do in West Virginia. I had a conversation with Henry Waxman out of California. Henry Waxman told us just straight up, our country's not broke. We don't need to be doing these things. And I turned to him and I said, The congressman from California, what part of $16 trillion in debt don't you understand? That we're broke. We've got to make those decisions to do it. And some of us have to have the courage to stand up and say, no, we're not going to continue this spending any longer. So it's an interesting dialogue. Nancy Pelosi has kind of drifted some to the back, but ladies and gentlemen, we're there working for you. So many of we're getting so much correspondence every day. We're trying to make sure we're responding to what you want. It's not me and my mission. I know what I want to get accomplished, but we're listening very carefully to the things that you've talked about, and we're working to try to accomplish it. When we look at some of the pieces of legislation, what we're doing for WVU, what we want to do is increase research on coal. I want nothing better at the end of this, my term and on my first year in office, to be able to say that we've been able to put more money into WVU for research into other uses in clean coal technology. If we can do that, we're going to improve the livelihood of all people across West Virginia and maybe across the country as well. But we've got a battle on our hands over there with the EPA that Lisa Jackson knows there's a new sheriff in town with that 87 Republican. I'll tell you, gave us all across America 87 new freshmen over there that are speaking up. And I'll tell you, we're not sitting back on it. Now, I happen to be the oldest of that freshman class, so I kind of chuckle every time when they talk about us being a freshman again. But if that's what it takes, I'm going to continue to speak out. They know I'm there representing West Virginia and the coal industry. They know we're talking about reducing expenses at the federal level because we can no longer be doing. Let me just give you one little tidbit of information as to where the country is and what's been happening. We're trying to find people to understand, to really grasp it. The state of West Virginia operates on $4 billion a year. We run the entire state of West Virginia on $4 billion. That means we run our colleges, our secondary schools, our health systems, our roads. All that is done with $4 billion a year. Right? $4 billion a year. Every day in Washington. Every day in Washington because of the deficit. Every day in Washington we have to borrow as a government $4 billion just to pay the debt. And when Henry Waxman says we're not broke, then I just wonder what fundamental economics did he take to understand where we're going with our country. But so every day we borrow as much money to run just the deficit that we could run the entire state of West Virginia for a year. Folks, think about that every day when we're talking about the reductions in spending and how important it is to get it back, because we're passing something on to our children and grandchildren that is not their responsibility. And I'm pleased to be able to say, we're voting, I'm voting this card I'm using to vote against any more expenditure. We've got to start cutting back, and I think they're starting to hear us in Washington again. So God bless all of you for coming down on a miserable day like this. You can move that hell look at that. Just talk long enough, that's all it was. But listen, God bless all of you, and let's just keep things moving for our country, our veterans, and this wonderful state of West Virginia. Thank you all very much.